says we're live, but before I bring my guest up every single time, I like to go check it on Facebook and make sure that everybody can hear me. There we go. Hold on one second. Yep, we sound good. And now, yeah, I've been sitting here talking to this guy for 20 minutes, no problems. Now I've got a gnat flying around me. We're going to be talking about God, maybe a little bit about God, and that's now there's the spirit is getting involved or something, sending bugs my way. This guy, I've the first time I met him, but I've heard really good things about him for quite a while. We have a mutual friend. We were just making fun of him, and Sean Whitfield. If there's any good stories this guy wants to bring up that's embarrassing to Sean, then 100% we're going to do that. Also, I've already told him if something happens with the internet, which it happens every now and then, he can click out and click back in. So if you see that happen, don't leave. He'll be joining us again soon. His name is Big Rich Brock. He said I can call him Big Rich, but I like to call people what they want to be called. And he's got a show coming up in Ringgold on the 10th. And then he's also got one coming up, Chattanooga Brewing Company, August 25th. I'll let him tell you more about those. Let's pull that off the screen right there. And let me unmute him. Here he comes, Big Rich Brock, 3, 2, 1. How are you doing, sir?
Clint, I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, that's going to be fun. We didn't know each other, and as soon as we started talking, we have some mutual friends outside of Sean. We talked about a comedian that you hadn't heard of in a while. And to be honest, the reason I thought of that comedian was because of your unique background.
Yeah.
There's not many, comedians that can keep it clean, mix in the spiritual part of it. And the comedian from the 80s I grew up listening to was Mike Warnke, and you'd heard of him.
That I had. Mike was in a church that I was a youth pastor at way back in the day. I started say a few years ago, but it was probably back in like 1993, which when you get a little bit older as me and you are, Clint, that was just a few years ago.
Somebody posted
he's a good guy.
Yeah, somebody posted the other day when they realized that like 2023 is to 1980 what 1980 was, like 1930. And I'm like, hey, I don't need that. That's hate speech. I don't need that.
I look at two things. A lot of my comedy, I talk about, I grew up in the 1900s. So I tell a lot of things from growing up in the 1900s, 70s, 80s. But the thing that gets me on that, like you said, is when people talk about when Purple Rain came out in the song 1999.
Yeah.
Now, I remember when that came out, I thought, man, wonder what 1999 is going to be like. Now I'm like, I can't remember what 1999 was like.
I don't know. I think it might have been better than now. That's when I'm at that age now where my kids will tell you every time something happens, well, we didn't do it that way. Back in the day, it was better. Yeah. The music was better. The movies were better. And in reality, I was just younger and had less responsibility, and things probably seemed a lot better.
Oh, they definitely seemed a lot better. But yeah. I think they were I know it was, if I was living at this age as a teenager, I wouldn't have got away with nothing. So
no.
I'm glad to be from a non-YouTube, I love it now, but all those things I would have been like, oh man, I got to have a break. It was hard enough because Clint, I grew up in a small town, Chickamauga, Georgia. I lived on Hog Jow Road, Chickamauga. You can't get any more country than a guy from Hog Jow Road, Chickamauga. But my dad delivered the mail in Chickamauga for 30 plus years, started when he was 21, did that till he retired. Now, Chickamauga's only got 2 mail routes. One of them he worked for 18 years, one he worked for 15. So my point, he knew everybody. So I got away with nothing. There wasn't any. People used to leave notes in their mailbox about my behavior at the ball game on Friday night, or out at the mall on Saturday, or Brainerd Road for us people that are older. And that was the place to be back in the 1980s. And I'm like, yeah, we didn't have text, we didn't have email, but we had notes. And everything good in my life and everything, every relationship I ever had, all started with a note. So, do you like me? Yes, no, or maybe. And if I got a yes or a maybe, I was good. A maybe was as good as a yes for Big Rich. I was persistent.
Absolutely. So it's funny you say that, because I want to get into how you starting as being a former pastor, and now you're doing comedy the last year and a half or 2 years or so, but you're starting to find your way not just on comedy stages, but back in the pulpit a little bit. We'll talk about that. But it's funny you say that about Brainerd Road. I told somebody the other day, I was maybe my kids again. I remember on Brainerd Road Friday and Saturday night, sometimes us guys would take lounge chairs, the old chairs, and put on the side, or ride in the back of trucks with the chairs with just the old chairs on there. And nobody was pulling us over. We were
No.
we were jumping from one truck to the other. It was kind of a crazy time.
We probably knew each other back in the previous lifetime.
Yes, we probably did. We probably did. So, all right, let's kind of walk me through, since this is our first conversation. Walk me
Sure.
through the timeline. You were a pastor. Life happens. You decide to take a break from that. Kind of get me to that point. And how long have you been doing comedy?
I've been doing comedy. First open mic, February of 2022 at the Comedy Catch in Chattanooga. That's my home club, like a lot of people in our area. And I did 3 open mics, and I decided to turn pro. I, I was too
Wow.
old to be
Yeah.
driving an hour to do 4 minutes, and I'm more of I get all the time. I'm like Jerry Clowers, James Gregory, those types, where I'm a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
So you give me 30 minutes and I'll make you laugh plenty of times, but I'm a storyteller. So doing open mics just frustrated me. I wasn't able to do my thing. So I took my church background as a church planter, and I went into venues that had never done comedy before. And I was like, hey, what do y'all think about doing a show? And they said, we've thought about it. We do music, but we've never pulled the trigger on comedy. I said, give me your slowest night. Give me 2 months and let me see what I can do. And that was 96 shows ago in the last 16 months.
So when you say non-traditional places, are you talking about like just venues, but they just never
Yeah.
done comedy, or just non-traditional venues?
I'm going to tell you something. Wineries, breweries, a lot of those. And the thing that's fun, like I laugh. My day job was a home inspector, and I had a company car. Now I do that very part-time, and I'm doing comedy 8 days a week. But I used to have my home inspector truck pulled out in front of every brewery and winery in Cartersville, and everybody thought, man, that home inspector's had a drinking problem. No, I was a comedian. That was where they wanted me. And I would go into those places, and I would say, can y'all pay me? No, man, we can't pay you. I said, well, how about if I sell tickets? And Clint, the biggest decision I had to make in my first month was how much to charge. And I'll give my ex-wife credit for this. That's about all. No, I'm teasing. She's like, if they'll pay $5, they'll pay 10. And I'm like, God, somebody will pay $10, come hear me tell jokes. And sure enough, the first show, I had 47 people come out, and I got done, and I got in the car and I cried, because I'm like, I found what I'm supposed to be doing, and I was 54 when I started pursuing comedy. Now, I did a lot of comedy from the pulpit, and I teased that might be why I'm not pastoring anymore. I did more comedy than I did inspirational stuff.
Right.
But a lot of the things I do in my show were things I did from the pulpit. I've got a few former church members that show up at shows that are like, I've heard that. I've heard that. I remember you talking about that. So it's a lot about growing up. It's a lot about, I can spend an hour talking about dating in your 50s, and keep people having a good time. But to get back to your question about ministry, and our good mutual friend Sean and I lived next door to each other, and I was the party guy. I was wittiest in our class. He and I graduated together, and I just lived for partying, entertainment, having fun. And at 21, I got born again, called into ministry, and at 22, I began to pursue full-time ministry, and I did that for 26 years. Worked in 2 mega churches, planted 2 churches, and had the perfect family, the wife, the 2.5 kids. No, actually we had 3, and that was my world. And I went through a divorce that I didn't see coming. And when I did, I thought, man, I don't have anything to give. My sweet mom, who I talk about a lot in my shows, she passed and went under hospice care the same time as my divorce was final. And I'm like, man, and my father needed my help. So I resigned from church work, and I started my own business doing home inspections. And that was going to be my life. And I was content. And then COVID happened. And during COVID, like a lot of people, I really evaluated what I want to do. And I've always wanted to do comedy, and I felt like I could, but I never stepped out and did it. And that's when I started. I used COVID to write and I wrote over 100 bits during that time, put them together, worked them. Instead of going to open mics, I go somewhere in Cartersville or Powder Springs or Ringgold or Dalton where I'm working, and I just pull up a chair at a coffee shop and I'll talk for 10 minutes and I'll work bits to people that are there.
Really?
I'd rather do that than stay up till 10 o'clock at night going to Midtown Atlanta, the Laughing Skull or to the Catch. I love them both, but a funny story, I did a open mic at Laughing Skull in Midtown Atlanta. I was the oldest person there. There were 25 comics, 5 minutes a pop. I had arguably the best 5 minutes of the 24 comics. And afterwards, the other comedians that were been at it a while, they're like, "Hey, we do another open mic. Are you interested at 12?" And I said, "You mean like at lunch?" And I knew they did. But they're like, "No, at midnight." I said, "Brother, I ain't staying up to no midnight. I got to go home and get to work in the morning." So that's why I went and started doing my own shows.
Yeah.
That makes
No, it does make sense. And, the best pastors that I've ever had or I've enjoyed listening to were storytellers. I mean,
yeah.
they found a way to mix the point and the message and the scripture and what needed to be said inside of a story, whether it was a story that they were retelling from the Bible or a story they were telling from their personal experience or just a story in general, just to make the point. Those are the best communicators, or storytellers. All right, so I've got 5 or 6 stuff written down here. We're going to jump around a little bit.
Okay.
Let's start off with just something kind of funny you said about the dating in your 50s. I got a question. Yes or no, thumbs up or down, dating apps? Thumbs up. Okay. I used to do a dating podcast with a friend of mine named Cora Lee. We did about 15 or 20 of them, and she comes on every now and then. And let me tell you what she and I do that you might like to do some point in time. And you're freezing up on me a little bit. Can you still see me okay?
Oh, yeah, I got you. I got my
Okay.
pen ready. I'm writing this down.
Well, so here's what we did. She comes in the podcast studio and she'll bring in profile pictures of guys, and then we just make up backstories on each of them. And they're not just normal profile pictures. It's the guy with half his face in his pit bull with a fish in his mouth or some crazy crap like that. So your thumbs up on dating apps. Okay.
Well, and there's 2 reasons, and I'll give you a little bit of my show that I'm doing in Ringgold, which is my 3rd tape show that I've got coming out on the 10th. And the 10th is my late father's birthday. So I like to honor him, and I do this show on August 10th in my hometown area. I grew up Chickamauga, but Ringgold's a throwaway. I laugh. I said, right now, one of my bits I talk about, my goal right now is to be the middle-aged man version of Taylor Swift of comedy. Looking for true love, but until I find it, I'm going to write bits about every date I go out on and hopefully make some money off of it. And that's kind of why I like dating apps. It gives me great material for my show.
Yeah.
And our mutual friend said, I don't know if I tell everybody that. You might not get any more dates, but there's people that love, are vain enough they want to be a part of the show. So
yeah, and not everybody on the dating apps, will watch this anyway or hear you. So
that's true.
We're
true.
not
But
Joe Rogan.
I'm the Taylor Swift of comedy.
That's how you should. Do you get introduced that way?
No, but I do that on my dating app.
Oh. Yeah, I think I would make it mandatory from now on. Hey, this is Big Rich Brock. He is, ladies and gentlemen, the Taylor Swift of comedy. There you go.
I think I'm going to say, I love it because I say I'm the middle-aged male Taylor Swift of comedy. I want true love, but until I'm writing material about every crazy that I meet.
Yeah.
And that's how she's made her income.
Absolutely.
So, hey, if it's good enough for Tay, I'm going to try it myself.
Well, not only that, I mean, I guess the goal for some people would be, I want to be included in one of Taylor Swift's songs. I'm the fodder for my joke. Why not dating? Oh, yeah. Thank you, Rachel. All right. So let me ask you this. Where do you say you work on new material? So where do you get your new material from? I love asking comedians this. I got my friend Eric, and I know my friend Brian Morton, who I've talked to, not to this link though. But where do you get your material from? Is it just life, or do you have stuff roaming around in your brain for years?
Both. But primarily what I do, Clint, is I grew up in a small town. I remember sitting in my grandparents' front porch a little screened in porch. It seemed so big when I was a little boy, but I drove by that house. It's still there. And I met the people that own it. And I said, can I go check out this front porch? And it's about the size of 2 desktops. But my grandpa, my uncle, my dad, my other uncle, me, and my cousin would sit there and they would tell stories every Sunday afternoon after the NFL games. And that birthed in me the power of storytelling. So a lot of the things that I do are things about growing up. Um, I also am able, I think one of my strengths in comedy, and I've got hired a lot of private gigs because I can bring together the over 50s and the under 50s because I talk about things. It's a trip down memory lane for somebody over 50, or it's a history lesson for somebody 20, 25, and they're having to Google. When I talk about my best friend pulling up in 1984 in a cherry red vet, and then I say it's a Chevette, but he had Corvette stickers all over it to impress the ladies. I was like, y'all got to Google that, kids, to figure out what I'm talking about. But most of my stuff is life experience. But I just look around and I think once you start pursuing this and you've got that ability, it follows you everywhere. I go to networking events for my day job. And today, man, I got some great comedy sitting in a networking event. There's one of my buddies who it's a group of 75 people, Clint. And the first thing everybody does is mute their phones. This guy forgot to mute his phone. So in the middle of it, his phone goes off playing like some song, some sex song. So a woman, I hope it's his wife. It was somebody that came on and he gets chewed out by the leader and everybody's looking at him. So what's Big Rich do? I give it 30 seconds and I call him on his phone to make his phone go off again.
Absolutely.
During the meeting. And by that point, he's over there fumbling. He drops it. It's playing some song that he's got mine, something about a comedian. I don't remember what the song was.
Yeah.
But for a good 30 seconds, and then he figures out it's me, and he just glances across the room, and he's like, you're a real, and I won't say what he said, but starts with an A, ends with 2 S's. And so that's just daily things you find.
Yeah.
The one thing I don't do is I don't make fun of people in my shows. Some people want you to. They're like, hey, my brother-in-law's here, stick it to him. That's not my style. Now, on occasion, it might happen, but it's never planned. Somebody might pull that out of me. And then anything I do about my family, I talk to my 3 sons and get their approval, make sure they're cool with it. I don't do very much about them. I've got 2 ex-wives, so I can talk about them for an hour and you don't know which one I'm talking about. So it works out great.
Yeah, and you could really be messing with yourself though, because if they both think it's about them, you're getting 2 phone calls, not just one.
That's true. That's true. But fortunately, I don't want to even go there right now. I'm just happy to be here.
That's a divorced man right there, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, twice. I was married 26 years, but mine was a variety pack. It took 2 women to get to that. But one was for 24 and a half and the other one a year and a half. So,
I've never seen I've never seen a grown man pull his tongue back in his mouth as fast as you just did then. It was, here we go. We're going to have a conversation. It's like, yeah, you know what? On second thought.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm so blessed
pay
to be here.
$15 and come to the show.
There you go. $15. He'll share the stories with you.
Yeah. I'll share the meaning of life.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about you go down this comedian road from the pulpit, but now you find yourself, and you can address both of these at the same time. You're finding yourself kind of back in the pulpit in a different way, and you're a clean comedian. And I know I love Brian Regan. I love Nate Barsgatti, however you say his name. I can't ever say his name. Bargatze. Yeah. I just know Nate. That dude's funny all day, every day.
Yeah.
And they're kind of clean. So talk a little bit about what it's like getting back in the pulpit and how that looks differently. And then a little bit being clean is part of it. Does that make it harder for you think, or easier?
I think for me, it's easier because I think in comedy, like anything, if you're a salesman or whatever it is you do, you got to be authentic. And yeah, I can cuss a blue streak if I stub my toe or, something like that. But my nature, I joke around. I'm a nice man. Ladies, I'm a nice guy. Only 2 women I know don't like me. Now, what's the odds I married both of them? Come on, somebody. But to, I try to take things and I do clean. Um, I'll give you one real quick. I normally open up places when I do private shows to kind of get a poll of people. I'll say, my ex-wife says my comedy is like the Golden Girls. Y'all watch the Golden Girls? And they're like, oh yeah, we love the Golden Girls. I said, well, it's kind of like them. I'll talk about sex for 30 minutes, but you won't know it unless you've had it before. That's about as rough as I get. One of my friends said it best. I'll lead you somewhere where you're thinking something that you're probably going, I wonder if he's going to say this. I never say it, but I'll get you to think about it. I'll make you repeat me. I'm going to come out. I'm going to come out clean on
The
it.
audience
But
is
I have
dirty, but
fun.
you're clean. I like
Yes,
that.
yeah. I'm just the former pastor, and
Yeah.
but I do clean, and I had to find my voice. I think every comedian, you have to find your voice, and I'm still finding it. I'm not the thing that gives me the advantage over most guys is I preached 4,000 sermons in my life.
Mm.
I've preached in prisons. I've preached on national television. I've done things in front of the camera that most comedians didn't get the opportunity to do. So when I started, I had that learning curve where it opened doors. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with dry bar comedy. If not,
Mm-hmm.
it's the marquee of clean comedy in the world. They out of Utah, so come on somebody, we know the background,
Yeah.
but they have had over 4 billion views on YouTube. And they have
Oh,
their own app
I watch them.
that's
I watch them.
yeah. Well, I did my special there. Season 12, I got the call. They sent me the contract. Hopefully, that'll be out in November, is what the target date is. But on my goals, that was on my goals for my 5-year plan. I got to do that in 8 months of doing comedy. So I'm like, the only reason that happened was one, I believe it's God's favor, but two, it's because I had the experience of talking in front of people all my adult life. So pastoring prepared me and doing TV. And I did one take television, meaning I couldn't afford production. If I screwed it up, I just had to fix it in the middle of it. And when you screw up preaching, everybody notices it.
Yeah.
So, you backtrack, and I used to do a show in Chattanooga that I did it. And it's funny, when I started, it'd been like 2000 to 2006, and WB Network, Channel 53. And the fellow that sold me the time, Clint, he was like, now, Reverend, and he called me Reverend, which cracked me up. I don't know why, but he's like, Reverend, you don't want that time. You want Sunday morning, 10 o'clock, in between the South Seminole Baptist Hour and Ben Hayden, back when Ben was alive, the first prayer, squeeze you in right there. I said, I don't need those people. I need lost people. I need heathen. What else you got? He goes, I'm embarrassed to tell you, only time we got available is Saturday night at midnight. Now, Clint, for a spirit-filled old young preacher, that was perfect for me. I said, great. He goes, you don't want that time. I said, that's when people are up with their babies. They're stressed about their money. They've been out drinking all night. They're sitting at home flipping channels. He goes, because the time is in between 2 shows. I don't want to tell you. I said, lay them
Oh,
on me. Professional wrestling and the Girls Gone Wild. I came on with my preaching. I said, perfect, man. That's
that's
what I want right there,
beautiful.
man.
That's like a holy sandwich right there, dude.
I
that's
would
the
come on, and like you were saying about Taylor Swift, I would come on and say, hey, if you've been tuning into professional wrestling, I'm going to put you in a headlock for Jesus today. Or if you've tuned into the Girls Gone Wild, you're a little early, but I'll go wild. And I would just do crazy stuff. And people would show up at the church and say, I watched you on TV. I
oh
say,
wow.
you watch me on Sunday morning or Saturday night? And if they said Saturday night, I knew I knew what they was up to. And
Yeah.
I'd always laugh when they'd say Saturday night. But I think that background, and you asked me about coming back. Coming back into the pulpit was, I've done one church show so far, and I've got 5 on the calendar coming up. And doing that church show, honestly, I've done 95 shows. That's the only one I was really nervous about besides Drive On. The hard part about doing comedy the way I do it is I promote the show. I set up the PA. I set up my merch. I sell my merch. I shake babies and kiss hands. I do it all. So getting to do the show that hour is the best part of my day. But going and standing up in a church again, I was like, man, this is surreal. But I liked it, and I found my podcast has kind of evolved into what that church show was like, where I'll do comedy and I might say some things that make you go, I can't believe he's a former pastor. But at the same time, I'll bring inspiration through my frustration. And that's kind of what I gear for.
Well, we'll talk about your podcast in a minute. I'll go back in time. I was in my late teens, and I will not give the name of this pastor. And he was a great pastor. I still love the pastor. But the first time I heard him say "damn it" when he was doing something, and I think he shut his hand in the door, so he goes "damn it." I was like, "Hey, wait a minute. Only one of us is supposed to work our way into heaven. By golly, you're supposed to already have it figured out. What are you doing?" And you just kind of. It's just like with your parents, though. The older you get, the more you realize, well, they were just kids and adult. They were human too the whole time. They were screwing up because that's all they knew.
I laugh in my shows, Clint. I talk about. I said I don't preach, but I said, I know that. I said I can easily explain to you that God is a true God and Jesus is the Son of God, and everybody else, God bless them, but it's just different. And you say, "Oh, Big Rich, that's kind of cocky. Why do you say that?" Last time I was in Atlanta traffic, Clint, I cut them off, and they didn't holler out "Buddha, damn it." They hollered GD, but I stubbed you think Tom Cruise stubs his toe and screams L. Ron Hubbard? No,
he doesn't.
Jesus, So I said, that's where the power's at. And
I'm going to wait a minute. I got to say this to you. I'm going to slow you down now. My mom hates it when I do stuff like that. So from this point forward, when I stump my toe, it is L. Ron Hubbard. That's going to be. I hope you've actually done that. I'm going to do it. I might try to trip or something on purpose.
I've done it, and I've got a T-shirt I'm building that says "Buddha, damn it" on it. So
that is good. That's funny stuff. Hey, can I ask you a quick? Real quick. I don't know if I interrupted you or not about the finishing up how you get back in the pulpit. Do you want to finish that, or did I interrupt you?
Sure. I think I got on a tangent, man. Me and you could talk till Jesus comes, and getting back in it, I had a friend that asked me to do. Well, I went back to church. The hardest people to pastor are former pastors because we've seen it all. We critique I'm sitting there lighting what the praise team's wearing, the audio. I'm not judging it. It's just all on my mind because that's what I did for 25 years in big churches. And when I went through my divorce, I went to a church up in Chattanooga for a little bit, and every church I'd walk in, it'd be, "Oh, Pastor Brock, how are you?" "Well, I'm not a pastor anymore." "Oh, well, where's your wife and kids?" "Well, they're not with me today." So you end up saying, "I'm just staying at home and watch something online." And then it ends up just being the NFL, and next thing you know, COVID hits. And we get through that, and I thought, I need to find somewhere to go to church. And I was looking around a little bit, never found anywhere that I felt like was where I was willing to be. And Easter Sunday, I show up at a church that I wasn't invited, but a buddy of mine, he actually films the shows that I do, the big ones, like the Ringo show. He owns a production company, and he's never said, "Hey, why don't you come to church with me?" He's just lived it in front of me. And just a nice guy. And I thought, if I'm going to go to church somewhere, I'm going to go where he is. And Clint, I walk in there Easter Sunday, and I sit down. As soon as I sit down, I heard in my heart, is what I call it, or spirit, "Welcome home." And I honestly said, "Dear God, that's the last thing I want to hear. I don't want a home. I got a home. I like sitting at the house." But I knew I needed to be in that church because they had something I needed, and I had something they needed. And if I'm in town, that's where I'm at, and that's where I go and I worship. So it's made it easier for me to get, and the first thing the pastor did was come to one of my shows, and I love him. He's a good guy, and it's so funny because a couple of the things I did, I was kind of nervous about him being there. That was his favorite bits that I did. And they're a little, yeah, kind
Yeah.
of. So I was like, okay, this is my man now.
Yeah.
So
Well,
getting
like
back
we
into
like we
pulpit,
said, pastors are humans, right? I mean,
yes,
they're humans. Yeah.
very much so. So
Yeah.
I did a church show, and then it was in the fellowship hall. So I laughed. So that wasn't really a church show, but it was a fundraiser for some. I, I think you'll like this. I'm doing a show at Shorter College next week or next month. I'm sorry, and it's to raise money for a group of students that are going to Ghana to do a mission project. And I asked him, I said, my opening joke is going to be, hey, y'all be careful on your over there at Ghana because you don't want to drink the water because it'll give you diarrhea. Or as they call it over there, gonorrhea.
Ah.
they're like, you might can do that at Barry. I don't know if you can do that at Shorter.
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
So
One of those other schools.
yes, take that
That's
to our
funny.
rival school. But I like I've got two preaching. I laugh. I've been asked to preach again in a couple places, and I was like, I'm going to do my comedy, but I will, and it's a Sunday morning type thing, and I'm looking forward to it, and I'm honored. I'm honored that they would ask me, and that God would trust me to come and inspire somebody. And I'm one of those guys. The glass is always half full, you know.
Yeah, well, I
So
was gonna
I
say
look
I
forward
have
to it.
several friends that are pastors, and I've been in the same church my whole life, so I've known all the pastors come through, and one of them in particular is still a really good friend of mine, even though he's older than I am. But he was very protective of the pulpit.
Yeah,
That is a when you stand up there, you're not. I know this sounds for people who don't go to church, you may not understand it, you're not just representing who you are if you're representing the church at that point, and
yeah.
I remember him saying that several times to me about getting people to come in and preach. So I thought that was kind of what, to your point, it is an honor.
Yeah, and Clint, I feel the same way about my comedy shows. Um, I've had the privilege my first year of comedy, I did 70 plus shows that I put on. Uh, I sold out 80% of them. They were 50 to 75 people venues, wineries, breweries, restaurants, the depot, those kind of joints. But I was able to bring on 35 different comedians and give them an opportunity.
Mm,
Because in comedy, most of these guys in Chattanooga or Atlanta or wherever, they're doing open mics and they're doing 5 minutes and they think it's a lot harder than what it is, or they're just not willing to do it. I put in a lot of work putting on shows, but it's worth it. It gives me where I can go and do my comedy for a full hour. And
mhm.
I don't know if you know Janet Williams, the Tennessee Tramp.
No.
She's a local comedian, sweetest lady you're going to find, but filthy's a days long in her set. She's like, me and you can never do a show together, honey. But she goes, I'm telling you, you've got it. She was a great encourager to me. But the first time I met her, somebody sent her like a 30-second clip of me at a bar doing my show. And they text her, this guy just went an hour and 15 minutes, kept everybody glued to their seats, in stitches, having a good time. And she says, I don't believe it. And then I told her my background, that I was a pastor in, the Pentecostal spirit filled, churches where if you didn't preach an hour, you didn't preach.
Right.
They wanted you to do a good hour. So I did a lot of stories, but she encouraged me and went to my first tape show and just, I've been encouraged by so many people that have been doing this full time. And they all tell me this: don't let being in your 50s stop you, because you know what you're about. You know your audience. I know I'm not everybody's cup of tea. That's okay. But I'm finding the people that need what I have to give them. And same way, talking about that with comedians, PG shows are different for a middle-aged man from Chickamauga than a 30-year-old from Midtown Atlanta. I
Mhm.
learned that the hard way. I brought in guys and they're talking about stuff that my people are like, if they thought it was funny, they ain't laughing because it was inappropriate to them. So I try to make my shows where I give people opportunity, but I say, hey, think 9 o'clock ABC, NBC, CBS. Think primetime TV type PG stuff. And I don't do comedy about politics. There's enough of that. I
Mhm.
don't do stuff where I pick on people. My goal in my shows is when it's done, I know it's been a good show, when people come up to me and say, "Hey, can I tell you about my dad? Or can I tell you about my first car? Or can I tell you about my spring break trip?" They've went back in their mind. I've taken
Mhm.
them to a place, because all entertainment is primarily is escaping from what you're having to deal with every day. So they're coming out to my show, spending 15 hard-earned dollars, giving up 2 hours of their night. I'm gonna entertain them, make them laugh, and make them feel good, and they might get a buzz if it's at a bar or winery while they're there. It
Yeah.
makes me even funnier.
I was gonna ask. That might help a little bit. Well, let's talk about this. You got about another 5 or 10 minutes for me?
Sure.
Okay. So, bombing. So you've done this long enough now to where you've had sets where you go, okay, and they didn't laugh on, the peaks and valleys weren't where I thought they would be. So in
Yeah.
your mind, though, bombing, and you mentioned earlier, in the pulpit or bombing on the comedy stage, how do they
I've
relate?
done
Which one's
both.
worse?
I've
Which
done
is
both.
worse?
Uh, I I'm gonna say the comedy stage, because people, I don't know, my shows, people extend a lot of grace. I tell these young guys that work with me, I said, they want to laugh. They're here to laugh. They're not here to, you know, rib you. Most people are in a show, they want to have a good time.
Yeah.
Um, I It's funny. One of my two things about bombing. One, the first time I bombed, I was doing an open mic at Laughing Skull Midtown, and I got distracted when I came out, and I got off my focus. And it wasn't that it was bad, but to me, it was terrible, terrible. And when I was done in my mind, I thought, okay, I'm done with this. I'm never coming back. This was a pipe dream. I'm finished. And by the time I drove home, I got all that pity party out of me, and I got focused, and I worked my material, and I went back 2 weeks later, and it was the best set I'd done up to that time. And it was the same material.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of it is confidence, and it's focus, and you got to be funny. I mean, you've got to have good material. I did a show. I don't do many shows that I don't get to do at least 30 minutes. Not because I think I'm somebody, but I know that's my strength. Is I tell stories and I tie them all back together. So, but I did a show when I maybe 3 or 4 months in, and they gave me like 7 minutes. There were 12 comics, I think. There's a lady there. We're in Calhoun, Georgia. There's a lady there that's drunk off her, you know what. She's from California. God bless her, but California and
Yeah.
Calhoun, two different, hemispheres. And every other word was F you, F you, F you. Every comic she'd get in an argument with. The guy before me, him and her spent 4.5 minutes just saying F you to each other. That's what his set was. He lost it. He went off on her. And then the guy comes up, he drops the mic, says, "Our next comic, Big Rich Brock." Y'all give him a hand. Yeah. I start, "Hey, I'm a former pastor, blah, 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 blah." She says something. And then I looked at her husband, who didn't say a word the whole night. I said, "Sir, blink twice if you need help." And I did. Everybody started laughing. And then she says, "Well, F you." And I said, "Listen, I don't normally go this route, but I just have a feeling y'all are into S&M, because I'd have to put a gag in your mouth. I'm sure your husband
There
gag
you
you and
go.
put a bag over his head, a
There you
mask."
go.
And everybody just, and she figured out, okay, I've made this all about me and nobody would stand up to me. You got to be careful dealing with hecklers, because most of them are drunk. Most of them, Steve Slay, who I love and I really like what he does. I heard him say in a podcast, most people can't hear a heckler except you, and maybe three people sitting around them. So you don't want to give them the whole attention of the show.
Right.
And that's why they say, "Hey, pay attention, we're going to kick you out," all that. But hecklers and bombing are two different things. But I'll throw this one out too, real quick, Clint. The first open mic I did, I looked out And the problem with open mics is it's normally all comedians or people that want to be comedians, and they're sitting over there in their little book and they're reading and they're working on their stuff. They're not listening, or they're asleep, or they're high. They don't care. And then there's maybe 12 people at the Comedy Catch that are paid people. I look out, and all 12 were a group of women there together.
Oh.
And my first bit was an ex-wife. An ex-wife.
Oh.
And they
Woo.
just looked at me like, you son of a, you know what?
Yeah.
And then I said, well, I went for one. I might as well go for two. And I just decided to do a Norm Macdonald. And I did all my ex-wife stuff.
All the ex-wife jokes.
And we're crickets. I mean, crickets, except one guy. And he's back in the back corner just having a time. But I think he was laughing more at how uncomfortable I was making everybody. And it didn't faze me. I thought, I got to get it out of my system. And I just thought, I'm going to kind of bomb on purpose to show, okay, I can get through this. And then when I do, knock on wood, it doesn't happen very often because I know my material. And, you know, and I tell young comics this, and it's probably the pastor in me, and there'll come a day when my shows are too big to do this. But now when there's 50, 100 people, before the show, I'm out there saying hello. Thanks for coming. How'd y'all find out about the show? Because I've learned if you'll connect with people, there's a better chance they'll listen to you.
Oh yeah.
And there's a better chance they'll laugh.
Well, see, I think that's the pastor side, because if you think about what you're doing, you're basically doing what I've seen every pastor do. Before and after the service, you're working the crowd.
Yes.
That's
good ones too.
Yeah.
Good,
I grew up. Yeah. That's when the pastor walks up to you and your family and goes, hey, how's it going in the Powell family?
And the key in church is you can say, how you doing, brother? When you don't know their name, you can call them brother or sister, and you sound spiritual. You do that in a comedy club, they're like, hey, you don't know who the hell I am.
That's
but
right.
You got that, but then you also have those churches when you get in the mega churches where they're like, I'm too anointed to talk to people before the service. I've been talking to God, so I don't want to be disrupted by. And let's be honest, in church world, just like in anything in life, 10% of the people are the ones that drive you 80% crazy.
Oh yeah.
You know, there's that 10% of people that are, as soon as you say, have a great day, dismiss, they're running up there to give you their 2 cents worth or suck the life out of you. And you just got to learn how to love everybody. And I try to kill people with kindness and be polite and be nice. And I think it helps me in my comedy. And like I said, I try to be the lovable fella that I am.
Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to ask you about your podcast.
Okay.
And then we'll talk a little bit about the 2 shows coming up.
Okay.
And then anytime you're up in town and you just want to jump in a studio and do a sit-down podcast, I don't know if Sean can be funny, but I mean, we can at least get him in there and make fun of him, maybe. You know, if he's
we
not
definitely do that.
Yeah.
And he won't even know it.
He'll figure it out later and text us.
Sean, who I love dearly. Yeah, Sean's one of those guys. He came to one of my shows, and I never saw him laugh at all. And afterwards, he's like, man, that was great. That was one of the funniest things I've ever been to. And I'm like, well, how about showing it? You know, how about expressing yourself a little bit? You know, untuck that shirt and have a good untuck.
See, you're stealing my line now. That's the only guy I know that tucks his shirt in to go work out, but that's okay. He's listening. I'll get a 7-page. I'll get a 7-page email. Hey, you started a new podcast.
Yes.
I think you're using Whitfield Media Studios. You've got 11, I think, or 12 that have been released. You got a couple more in the books. Tell everybody where to find it. What's the name of it? And do you like podcasting?
Yes, I love it. I think I was born for it. You know, I joke around. Sean brought me in for a test, and afterwards he was like, how long you been doing this? And I'm like, well, I've been a pastor for 25 years. So I'm used to this part of it. But my podcast is called Big Rich Brock and Friends. And it's part comedy, part inspiration, part frustration. I just kind of birthed it because Sean Whitfield pushed me to do it. And once I started doing it, I enjoy it. I find it therapeutic in one sense.
Yeah.
You know, I'll talk about kind of when I started it, Clint, I'll tell a bit from one of my shows, a story, and then I kind of peel the onion and talk about I do this bit about being an only child. Being an only child, which I am, was awful, except for Christmas and your birthday. And I go through that bit and I explain it and I tell stories about it. And then, but what I've seen my podcast evolve into is comedy, but then I talk about things, going through life, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I'm a father of 3 kids. I've got 3 awesome sons. I've been through divorce. I've lost both my parents to illness. And I'll talk about going through difficult things and keeping hope and keeping my sense of humor in the midst of all that. Some of my hardest days are some of the times I've written my best material.
Oh yeah.
And I think there's a correlation to that. But I enjoy doing it. You can find it everywhere. Anywhere you can find Clint, you can find Big Rich now because I've got hooked up to the man
Parker.
that gets everything out there with Parker, and it's available. Be a part of it. You can also find me, Facebook, Instagram at Big Rich Brock Comedy. My boys are a nervous wreck because I emailed them. I texted them and I said, "Boys, your daddy's now a TikToker." And they're like, "Oh God,
Lord.
what are you doing on there?"
Yeah.
And I'll just do, it just depends.
Buddha, damn it. Exactly what
Yeah,
they said.
I
Yeah.
do Buddha, damn it. One of my best ones on there is I do do this thing where I talk about my senior class. I was ranked number 72 academically out of 106. Nobody knows what Sean was. He won't tell us. But I remember that, Clint, because my dad delivered the mail at the school. And back in the 1900s, they put that list on the front door of the school for everybody to see.
Yes, they did.
If you did that now, oh my Lord, CNN will be down there televising it.
Absolutely.
The National Guard would come in and take the principal out, and somebody would start a GoFundMe page for the bottom third of the class for their pain and suffering.
That's
So
exactly right.
I was 72, so I talk about that.
Yeah.
And in my podcast, and I did this little thing on TikTok about being 72 out of 106, and I had my senior class picture up, and I had me circled, and for me, it was funny. I'd never TikTok. I did one TikTok, and I had 5 people see
Yeah.
it. And I was like, I got a few thousand hits on that. And for me, I was like, my God, I'm 55 years old. 3,000 people looked at that. I'm blown away. But I'm learning that stuff. But what I try to focus on is my live show,
Yeah.
then my podcast. Live show, podcast, social media, kind of in that order for me.
Well, let's do this. And I'm going to give you a hard time, even though we've not met each other before. But one thing you didn't bring up, and I'm a little surprised you didn't make fun of yourself on it. It's give me the name of the podcast again, sir.
Big Rich Brock and Friends.
Okay, that last part right there, you haven't had any friends on yet. We got to get a friend on there, man. We got to get Sean Whitfield. Make him your first guest.
He's my announcer.
Oh,
I
okay.
always say my friends are everybody listening.
Oh,
And when I do my shows,
gotcha.
I'll sometimes have an opening act, and sometimes I say my friends are you 100 people that came out to the show. And I had one comic, I won't mention his name because I'll have to slap him one time. He tried to be funny one night. We did a show, had maybe 40 people, wasn't as big a crowd as we normally have. And he said, "Looks like Big Rich doesn't have any friends." And I said, "Well, it's because they heard you were here." He's like, I said, "How many people did you bring to this thing?" I said, "None." I said, "Y'all are riding on my coattails and I have a bad night. And y'all riding on my coattails." But
That's
I
funny.
hope to start incorporating other comedians and getting my studio here at the house fixed and all that.
Yeah.
But Sean has been not only great in Whitfield Media, but he's also a good friend that's pushed me. He saw my ability to do it, and he's pushed me to press through. And I truly believe once I get about 6 months in, it's really going to help my comedy. And this is the first one that I've been a guest on, other than a couple buddies down here that 5 people have watched. So their mama and their first wife watched it. So I'm excited to be here.
We'll upgrade. I'll get a mom and a dad and an ex-wife.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll just.
Hey, I got 2 ex-wives, so if they're watching, but
Sure.
I'm not being paid for this, and you can't take half for free, so they ain't gonna be watching. I will give them half of fun. I'll give them 2/3 of fun.
Okay, not all though.
F, yeah, no, I'll give them the F and the U.
There you go. If I had the drum, I do ba-dun-tsh.
Yeah.
There we go. We're good. Hey,
Yeah.
okay, so everybody can find the podcast. Again, yeah, Sean's a great dude. We love giving him grief. Before I let you go, your 2 gigs. Make sure everybody knows
Yes.
what we will book in if they want to get and how do they get tickets?
Tickets are it's great because the show in Ringgold is at the historic Ringgold Depot, downtown Ringgold, Georgia, on August 10th. It's Thursday night, Friday Eve for big rich people. You come out on Friday Eve on a Thursday. Great restaurants in walking distance, downtown Ringgold. The show starts at 7. Doors open at 6. We'll have a bar available, refreshments. Tickets are $15 through Eventbrite. So go to eventbrite.com, Big Rich Brock, get your tickets. Limited seating, but unlimited laughs. And I encourage you, we're going to tape. It's going to be a live tape show. So I need people there that know how to have a good time. And that one's a lot of fun. And then the show we're doing in Chattanooga, got approached by Chattanooga Brewing Company, which is over by Finley Stadium, South side, all that right there. And they reached out to me and they're like, man, we heard of you. We watched you. You do clean comedy. We've never done comedy. We'd like to have you come up and do a show. So I'm going to be up there on Friday night, August 25th at Chattanooga Brewing Company. And that one, just show up. It's a free show. Bring your drinking money and your eating money, and definitely bring some tipping money. And that one hopefully will turn in. Every show that I've done so far that I've done at one venue has turned into me being back there multiple times. And that's my goal, is to go to places maybe every other month and do a Big Rich and Friends. I've got enough material where I can do a different 45 minutes many times, and then I bring in a guest comic or two, and they're clean. It's like I laugh. I do brewery shows, and people say, "Can I bring my 10-year-old?" And I'm like, "Hell, if you want to bring a 10-year-old to a brewery, help yourself."
Yeah,
I said, I'm not going to say anything they haven't heard. Probably you say in the car, and I'm not dirty, so it's fine. But just watch them. Don't let them run around like all over the place. But I'm looking forward to those 2 shows, and you can find my schedule on Facebook at Big Rich Brock Comedy. And Clint, if I could ask everybody to like that Facebook page, because man, I'm a middle-aged man. I didn't know my friends page for my personal is out the roof. My comedy page is 1,000 people because everybody hits my Rich Brock page.
Right.
And
yeah.
like, hey, you need this comedy page to get into all these clubs. And I've done 5 comedy clubs so far this year. And all of them I've done is a feature. Went in, done 30 minutes and for a guy headlining. And I got great feedback. And the Dry Bar special will be out. And all you Dry Bar subscribers, let them know, hey, when's Big Rich coming out? When's Big Rich? They're working on it right now. And I was honored to get asked to be there. And then I found out they don't release everybody. There's a lot of them they do that never make the light of day. And when I was there, they told me, hey, we'd like to have you back in about a year and a half. And I'm like, does that mean I wasn't good enough today? They said, no, that means you were awesome. And we want to get you back. And I said, thank you. That makes me feel good. And talking about bombing, and there was a guy on there with me. See, all that's taped and edited, and he'll probably be the most famous of everybody. But he got up and did his set, said hello, did his first joke, and then went blank. And he just lost. I mean, he sat there for 90 seconds. And me and the other comic knew what he was trying to say. And we're in the green room just kind of trying, cat, say a cat. It's a cat,
Yeah.
And he just, I'm sorry, I don't know what to do. I got to start over. And that was, watching that, he got through it. And we did 2 shows, so he did okay. But man, that put the fear of comedy on me. I was like, damn it. I was like,
yeah. Yeah, I think it'd be worse to fail. Yeah, I think it'd be worse to fail on the comedy stage too. Now, at least on a pulpit, you've got enough muscle memory to.
Yeah, and you can always go down the altar and just start praying.
Everybody bow your head. Let's pray for a minute. Everybody, I need some heads down,
Somebody
eyes
lay
closed.
hands on me. Come on.
Yeah. When
you can do enough lingo You can do enough. Well, and it's funny and real quick in church world, when you don't know what to say, you do lingo. In comedy world, what most people do when they don't have anything to say is they swear
Mm,
because they're like, I can get a cheap laugh dropping an F bomb or something like that. And I have no problem with cussing in a comedy show, meaning if somebody else is, if it's funny and it's part of the bit.
mhm.
But just to get up there to cuss, I'm like, I think that's just kind of a cheap laugh, so to speak. Not that clean comedy's harder, because it's not. Any comedy's hard. I don't care what you're doing. If you're looking like the guys on Jackass, that's hard to come up with. It's painful. Thank
Yeah.
God I'm not doing that. But any kind of comedy that it's the hardest art form because people say, well, I don't know, I play guitar. No, you've got a gift and it took a lot of time, but I can't make a living saying the same joke for 30 years. You get one hit song, man, you can milk that thing out for 30, 40 years.
Eric
I've got to mix it
Foster,
up.
my friend, and then we'll wrap this one up.
Yeah.
My friend E. Foster, he's a professional comedian. We've talked about this on the podcast many times. If you think being a comedian is easy, just go grab a mic for 4 minutes. Go do it. You don't have to be a storyteller like Big Rich. Just go grab the mic for 4 minutes in front of about 30, 40 people
Yeah.
that they are expecting to laugh. Let me know how, and if it goes great, you might have found your niche. But I promise you, the first time you grab that mic, it's going to be different.
Clint, in that, and it reminds me talking about hecklers earlier. When I get in a show and if somebody's not listening or they're a little rowdy, I'll stop. My first 30 seconds, I'm like, hey, how many of y'all done an open mic before? Raise your hand. 99 out of 100 times, it's nobody. And I'm like, well, listen, you bunch of wimps. Y'all need to sit down and shut up and listen to Big Rich. And everybody starts laughing, has fun with it. And one night, this guy, he had a few drinks in him. He's like, hey, can I do it tonight? He goes, can I do 4 minutes tonight? I'm ready. And I'm like, and this dude's hammered. He's out on his birthday. He's about 35 years old. And I'm thinking, and that's where being a lifelong smartass before I was a Christian and a pastor,
Yeah.
I dug back in there and I'm like, what am I going to say? I said, I'll tell you what, buddy. I said, if you paid for your own ticket tonight and your mama and daddy didn't pay for it, I'll give you 5 minutes right now. And he just froze. And everybody at his table started laughing because he's 35 years old and his 70-year-old mama and daddy bought his ticket. I said, you can't even buy a ticket. Just sit down. Shut the hell up. We don't want to hear a word you got to say.
And I bet
And everybody died. And it got his respect.
Yeah.
He ended up that night buying a T-shirt. His mama bought it for him, but bought a T-shirt, had fun, and has been back to a show. So that's funny, though, that Eric said that. It made me think of that.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Man, I wish you the very best. I wish you the best on the 2 shows coming up, more local here to Chattanooga, but wherever you go, I hope it's a sellout. And I hope one day I'm buying the net, I'm on Netflix and I'm watching your special. That'd be nice too.
I love it. And Clint, thank you for having me, and I appreciate you so much and look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Big Rich Brock and Sean Whitfield, for setting that up. See you, everybody.